All right, we're here at Build, and we're going to talk a little bit about XAML, all things XAML with the new Universal Windows platform. It seems like XAML everywhere all the time. I'm pretty excited about it. So let me talk a little bit about myself. I'm a dev, not very good at design. So we have some folks here with design. How do you get started with designing XAML apps across all of the devices that are available for Windows, including HoloLens, for example?
So when we first started working with Windows 10, specifically on XAML, we kind of took a look at the two ecosystems that we kind of had in place. We had the Windows Phone tool set and we had the Windows tool set. We really kind of had to take an evaluation of what was that experience that we really wanted to have across the board. And so what we had to do is level set. And we had to come up with a single set of controls that could scale appropriately across all the range of devices and provide the experience that our users want.
I see, and so let's introduce ourselves first. Who are you and what do you do at Microsoft?
Okay, I'm Jeff Arnold. I'm a design lead in the Windows Design Studio, specifically on the development platform with Tim and Harini here, and also own parts of the shell as well.
So tell us a little bit about the design process with XAML. Is it different than designing other things? Does a dev have to do it? How do you think about all of these things at once when you're doing design?
Sure. So the way that we started is we do work very closely with the XAML team on this. We took a look at the Windows common controls and then the Windows Phone common controls from a design perspective and thought about how to converge them in a way that really brought the best of both worlds together. And then we worked closely with the engineering team to actually build them in the way that we designed.
Fantastic. And so when you say Windows, by the way, you are?
I'm Carmen Zlayteff, and I'm from the Windows engineering team, and
Fantastic.
I help out with the app patterns.
Fantastic. So when you talk about, you call them common controls?
That's right.
What are those? Is there a collection of these things? What are they?
Yes, there's quite a large collection of them. There are things like the context menu, the date picker, my gosh,
Pivots.
there's just pivots. And
Split view.
Now, do these things change based upon, like, is there a way to just build an app with design core that works across all the devices, or do you have to have a core and then sort of a design perspective for each device?
It's really up to the developer on how they want to handle it. The controls are built to work with all the input devices that we have today, with mouse, with touch, with keyboard, even controller for Xbox. And then it's really down to the developer. Do they want to create a more tailored experience for a specific device like a phone, how they would handle that differently than they would for a desktop.
So as I've started to dabble in XAML, I've done some WPF stuff. If you're a WPF developer, moving over to sort of the cross-platform, maybe this is for the technical folks, moving over to the cross-Windows platform thing, is there going to be a jump? Is there going to be some kind of change in the way you do things? Please introduce yourselves and then tell us maybe a good answer for that.
I'm Harini. I work with Tim in the XAML. I'm one of the PMs in the XAML team. We're as part of the engineering team.
And I'm Tim Hewer. I'm also a program manager on the XAML team.
So how do you move from your WPF app, let's just say I have a really good WPF app and I want to move into a universal Windows platform app?
I think the good thing about, if you have the skills in WPF, XAML, we throw the term around XAML quite a bit. XAML, first and foremost, is a language. And WPF has an implementation of that language, and Windows Runtime has an implementation of that language. So for the most part, if you know XAML as a WPF developer, you already know XAML as a Universal Windows platform developer as well.
I see.
And then it just becomes the nuances of what are the common controls that are available. WPF has a different set. Not really a complete, you think about the core things, like Carmen mentioned, date pickers and inputs and buttons and things like that. Those are all pretty standard. And then, there's a big ecosystem available for WPF. And those things probably won't directly translate over for Universal Windows apps. Definitely their binaries wouldn't, because the implementations are a little different. But if you have the skills as a WPF developer, then I would say the jump is really only in understanding the Windows runtime, not necessarily the UI language or anything like that.
I see. So what?
Actually, I would even add, as a WPF developer, you actually probably have a step up in understanding Universal Windows apps, because you already have to think about window size changes and things like that we're now asking developers to be aware of.
So what does a project look like? Say I want to build a project that will target my phone, the desktop, and then HoloLens. What would that project look like inside of Visual Studio?
So right now, right off the bat, if you just create a universal Windows app, at that point, that app is going to work across all of these devices right off the bat. You don't have to do anything specific if you don't want to. All you have to do is create a single app, and it already has the capability to run across all of these different device families in itself. If you do want to tailor, our recommendation is to just think about like window sizes and capabilities. Those should be enough for you to think about in terms of what are the device characteristics, and most likely just thinking about your UI in terms of effective pixels should get you far enough out there. And then if you want to further tailor, there are other APIs that you can use and all that stuff. But all of this is going to be contained inside a single project if you want.
I see. And so you pretty much start a new thing and it works.
Yep.
But it might not look very good on the phone. It might look really good on the desktop. And so do you create a new project that builds on top of that core?
That used to be the old way of doing things. You don't need to create new projects. You just need to create, multiple representations of your UI for example, when you say phone, I would ask, what exactly about the phone are you looking for? For example, if you're looking for tailoring your UI for one-handed use, we would suggest that you think about, okay, what is the scenario that's driving it? Maybe it's about the diagonal size of the device, because it's about holding the device in one hand and then using it. So if you're thinking about it in terms of that, then you could probably look for an API that gives you the diagonal size of the device and then tailor your UI based on that.
I see, that makes sense. So I'm a horrible designer, so I'm glad you're here to help me. How does XAML help you to be a good designer? And then the second and more important question is, how do I get a good sense of design for these particular types of devices?
Okay, I can start.
Please.
So there's a concept in this, or there's a design guideline that we talk about called breakpoints. And breakpoints is screen widths in these effective pixels where an app has an opportunity for new layouts. So for example, on a phone, it makes most sense to have a one-pane layout. But as that application then goes to run on a tablet or a laptop, moving to a two-pane layout when there's more effective pixels on the screen could make sense. So a real-world example here is a mail application running on the phone could have a message list. And then when it runs on a tablet or a laptop, it could have the message list in the preview pane.
Right,
so as
okay.
the screen gets bigger and you pay attention to these breakpoints that we have guidelines on, you can really tailor your app to the device.
So where are these guidelines? You said you have guidelines. Where are they? I want to look at them.
Sure. So there's the Windows 10 HIG is available at design.windows.com.
Oh, that's
and it was
cool.
just released today. So there's a ton of information out there. There's code samples, case studies, tons of information.
How does XAML help us at design time sort of take into account these things? Do I have to make one XAML page for the phone and one XAML page for the actual two-column layout, or can you do it all in one?
So the way we built the common controls, you kind of get what we would say is like the default of Windows, just out of the box. You drag and drop any of the controls on the page, like the pivot control, and it works inside of that 320 pixel space. As the device size gets larger, it takes up the space appropriately for that device size.
I see.
And and it's not actually to me, I don't feel like it's a function of like how to make it more beautiful from device to device to device. It's going to look beautiful on each of those devices. It becomes more of a function of, is the functionality there appropriate to that device?
I see. Yeah, I have more space. I might as well use it for clickable stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's taking advantage of the screen real estate is definitely one of those things. I think it's something that we have not done that good of a job prior on some of these larger screen devices, but really taking advantage of all the extra real estate, putting by leaving space for more content. But then just other things that you can take advantage of on on a phone, with GPS and stuff. You may actually just have different features that you want to add into your application just because it's on the phone as well.
So I'm kind of a noob at this. Is there a way in the XAML page to say, do this if we're in a wider screen, or if the view, because the way I think about it is I think about HTML, and then XAML is you can do way more things with that. But in HTML, you can specify a viewport size, for example. Is there a way to do that in XAML when you're designing stuff?
So I believe that's kind of more of a question for Karini.
Yeah. All right.
Sure. There's a session right now going on. I think Joe Stegman is conducting that session. He's going to talk a little bit about that. Tim and I have a session tomorrow where we'll be doing a deep dive on some of these concepts that we've introduced. So in XAML, yes, we have introduced some improvements to Visual State Manager, where you can now create inline in markup just a simple rules engine by using some of our new APIs like adaptive trigger, and just specify when the current window width is anything greater than or equal to a specific effective pixels, you can just have it as a single line in markup, and that particular visual state will automatically get applied.
I see.
Yep.
I see. So What is your guys' prescription for building these things? Is there like a framework you should use? I've heard of MVVM. Is that something that we're prescribing that you should use when you're building these kind of applications? And if so, why is that the best way to do it?
I think the, to me, MVVM is a tool just like any other tool in somebody's toolbox. I don't think that you'll hear from our team specifically say, this is the best way to build an app. Apps come in many different shapes and sizes and your needs. A lot of people say, oh, MVVM is the best way to test an app. And some people don't care about testing, unfortunately. So, and if you're building a game, is MVVM the best way to use a game? And these are all just tools that you should evaluate, like what is best for your app. Same thing, even just on the controls and things, and the guidelines that we mentioned too. These are all just guidelines and information available to you to make the best decision. We as Windows want apps to be the best apps for that brand, for that company, for that whatever tool or thing that it's going to do for the customer. We want it to be best for those scenarios. My mother-in-law doesn't care that it was built using MVVM. She just wants it to be fast and responsive and do exactly what she expects it to do. Right. So, from an engineering standpoint, there are some things, there are some benefits and downsides to certain patterns. MVVM is certainly one of them. The thing you see a lot out of the tools is just kind of the standard code behind approach, which works for quite a bit of apps as well. Our platform is kind of agnostic to any of these patterns. Like we welcome anything, and we've done, some of the new things that we're doing are actually you can do today and write code to do that. But we have heard that people, XAML is a very productive language. People want that productivity in Visual Studio and using the binding engines and things like that. So we've exposed more of these APIs to be able to use more markup in a more performant way as well.
That's awesome. So moving on to a next topic, what are some of the new things coming out for XAML? Is there anything new that we should know about?
Absolutely. Do you want to start with the split view and stuff?
Yes, we have a set of new controls to kind of be more building blocks to some of the app patterns. So we have a couple new, and I would say there's a lot of new as well, as we talked about kind of converging the designs across the Windows Phone platform and the Windows platform. So there's some new visuals. The APIs haven't changed, which is good for developers, but some new visuals that have been refreshed. Date Picker is one that comes to mind. Looks a little different if you kind of compare the different platforms there. We do have a new control, split view, that kind of helps with kind of a pane and secondary type content information. That helps with some patterns. Harini alluded to some of the more frameworky features around responsive design and things like that. And then we did, this year, we did a bunch of performance work. So we've introduced a new way to do binding that gives, again, retains the same productivity for the developers, but achieves the maximum performance in both startup and memory costs. And that was really actually influenced by the Office team, who uses XAML to build their universal apps. And they have started out with this their own version of a binding engine, and heavily influenced the feature that we do.
That's super cool. So you said something about app patterns. What is an app pattern? What is that?
So the app patterns are, when we first started looking at how we wanted to put together applications inside of Windows 10, we took an audit of all the different navigational patterns that are out there today across all platforms. And what we came up with is, we had things on Windows Phone like pivots and hub and those things, types of things, and we've come up with ways of actually bringing things like hamburger pattern now to Windows. Just ways of building some of these patterns that are just very prominent, very much out there in the world that people use on a daily basis.
And so you've sort of made common controls out of those patterns. Is that?
Some of them are common controls, and some of them are building blocks to build the pattern themselves. Like Tim talked about the split view. That one was specifically built to enable the hamburger pattern. So the 3 bars, the top left-hand corner of the page. We made that one specifically to make it easier for porting of apps to Windows that are already using that. If you have a team that they don't have a designer, they don't have the money to go and redesign an entire app just to come onto Windows. They don't have to. They can just bring it straight across because now we support that pattern.
I see. So I'm kind of a visual learner. Like, I have a hard time coming up with something new, but once I see it, it's like, oh, I should use that kind of pattern. Do we have any advice on how we should lay out these things anywhere?
Yeah, so we know that every app has three main areas. There's a navigational element, how you navigate around the app. There's a content area, and then there's the commanding, what you do on that content. And like Jeff was saying with these app patterns, we've taken all three of those elements and kind of shown with each pattern what those could look like. Where should you place the command bar when you're on a phone? Well, it should be at the bottom for one-handed usage. Where should your navigation be? Well, if it's a very important aspect of your app, it should be on screen, it should be viewable, it should be accessible. And so there is a lot of guidelines around those particular three areas of navigation, content, and commanding as it relates to the app patterns that help people get started.
That's awesome. So not only are we supporting people with here's some app patterns, but we're giving them tools to sort of realize those app patterns in XAML.
Yes.
Excellent. Well, what else can you guys tell us about XAML that you're really excited about?
So the one thing that we missed talking about was relative panel. So maybe I'll put in a plug for that.
For what now?
Relative panel.
Okay.
It's a new layout construct that we have introduced in XAML. Previously you used to have grids and stack panels to kind of lay out your UI. And one of the things that we introduced is a constraint-based layout mechanism. So it'll help you in doing some of these app patterns where if you want to morph your UI based on available space a little bit, such that maybe some commands were positioned in some place and you want to move it to a different place, it's going to be much easier to do that using a relative panel with constraints which says this element has to be right off this element instead of below this element, something like that.
That's interesting. Is this a new layout control?
Yep.
Okay, excellent. Any other new or exciting things in XAML that you'd like to talk about?
I think across the board, the thing for the XAML team this year was a lot about enabling our first-party and shell customers. So in Windows 10, there's quite a bit of XAML use in the core experiences of Windows that put some new constraints on our team to be able to live up to the expectations of a Windows user that when you click the start button, it shows up in a certain amount of time and those things. So we put a lot of focus on performance and being able to achieve those core scenarios. When you think about someone like Office or Windows itself using the same framework that we ask our customers to use, I can't think of a better case study than that. So we spent a lot of time focusing on the performance, and we still have a lot of work to do, but I think that was probably one of our greatest achievements this year. And all of that accrues. It's not just for people who are within Windows, most of our XAML apps are C++, but all of the benefits that we did in the framework benefit anyone who's using the framework. So, our reduction in memory benefits the simplest Hello World app and those things. You don't have to be a customer like Office or the Windows Start menu to be able to get the benefits of all the things that we delivered.
Got it. You mentioned that the Office team is using this stuff. Is there any other dogfooding going on that inspired some of the stuff that you've been adding?
The Start menu has some animations that, and actually, I wouldn't say they have some animations. They have some requirements to do some animations that enabled us, or pretty much informed us to basically say, we got to support these things that they want to do. So we implemented, forget the API, Transform 3D capabilities within the framework to do a little bit beyond the Perspective 2D that we have. And so you'll start seeing that appear in some of the Windows builds on places like Start and some of the other apps, perhaps.
So the UI for actual Windows 10 is built
Mostly
on XAML?
XAML.
Yes.
Oh,
a lot of the
pretty
modern UI, yeah.
I mean, that's like the ultimate test there, right?
Yeah.
That's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for coming by. Any parting words? Where should we go to look to find more?
I think we have, all the sessions are recorded. We have a lot of good sessions that talk about the design perspective for Windows. Carmen and Jeff have their session, as well as I believe there's a panel that talks about with Albert and Joe and those guys that kind of talk about the Windows story, which doesn't have to be our customer story. It's just us sharing our story. And then likewise,
We also have a lot of samples that are going to be posted on GitHub, so a lot of the universal Windows.
That's cool. Well, this is very helpful, and I'm glad we because as developers, the Battleship Gray was our standard for so long, we just can't afford to do that. I'm glad we have someone from design and from the technical side. Thanks so much for spending time with us. Where can they look you guys up if they want to get a hold, our audience wants to get a hold of you guys? Do you guys have Twitter or something?
Sure. No.
You're not a Twitter person?
Carmen shuns the social.
Tweet not.
Do you want to us to give a plug about our Twitter account?
Or something. I mean, people
Contact
want
Tim and he'll let me know.
Yeah, talk to Tim.
Yes.
Everybody.
We want people to be active on the forums. We want them to discuss.
Where are the forums?
The forums on the Dev Center, so dev.windows.com.
Okay, well, cool. Well, thanks so much for spending some time with us. We will be back, and if you have any other questions, please make sure to talk to Tim, who will relay it to everybody else. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.